My name is Dr. Jenna Usprech. I'm an assistant professor of teaching in the School of Biomedical Engineering at the University of British Columbia. I've been in this role for 5 years, and I am very excited to talk to you today. I am involved in about 5 different courses, and I guess maybe 8 total since I've started at UBC. So I focus a lot in teaching design courses. So I teach our 3rd year design course, and I help coordinate our 4th year final year capstone project course. I also teach our core professionalism and ethics course that has specific focus in biomedical engineering, which is one of my favorite courses to teach. And I also teach a cellular bioengineering laboratory course, as well as a graduate course in science communication. How I push students to do really good work, to think really carefully, I think does differ depending on the course that I'm focusing on and the specific kind of age range or year of the student, if they're an undergrad or grad. But I'll focus it maybe on talking about engineering design first, because I teach a number of those courses. In those courses, I think there's always a way for students to think more deeply about their topic. They can always do more research. They can always ask more people for their input, to think about more stakeholders, to think about like downstream effects of their design, finding more support, justifying their decisions better, doing quick calculations or experiments. So I think it really does require me to probe about someone's thought process in that setting. So if I'm chatting with a student and they're asking me a question about a certain point in their design, it's trying to figure out, well, what central question do they have? It might be specific to their design, and then we can explore that a little bit, but it also might be a broader, more conceptual design concept. And so I like to tie things to, well, the bigger concept in general about like, sometimes students are like, how much detail do I need to put here? How do I scope something? And you're like, that is a question that's hard to answer with a succinct one specific way of doing that. So it's really about then asking them questions back about, well, what do you think about it? What are you concerned about most? What did your client tell you? If your client told you this, have you considered other perspectives? And really just flipping the script. And students sometimes don't like this because they're like, I asked you a question, you're asking me a question back. But it really is about like probing their understanding and trying to tailor, I guess, how to think about something more deeply, more critically, and then trying to call out where someone might be jumping ahead in assumption, jumping ahead in logic, missing a concept or something critical. I mean, I don't think I get it right all the time, but I think the process of like being curious about not only what is the specific question that they're asking me, but like, why are they asking me that question? Is it because they're anxious and they just want reassurance? Is it because they actually really don't know? Or are they struggling to find this information and they just don't know how to even start tackling it? So I try not to solve all of the things that students come with me in terms of problems, but it's about like getting to the root of like why they're asking it, what they're exactly asking about, and like giving them a little bit more agency of like, hey, like this is your role as an engineer or as a budding engineer. You're going to develop this skill. So it's okay if it's not perfect right now, but if you can push yourself to like really justify all of these decisions that you're making and think about it really deeply and like really like log your thought process, then like those are the things that are critical to like being a good engineer. So that's like in the design context, how I sort of get students to, I like push challenge them, but then also recognize, I guess in my 3rd year class, I would expect a lot less of a sophisticated report or a lot less development of that justification skill or ability to do research than I would in like a final capstone year or a grad student. What they're able to kind of deliver, I would expect to be different. So then you sort of scale your expectation of like, they're still practicing the skill, but it's just at a different level, like a higher level, where I would expect that they're sort of going through some of this process on their own. Yeah, I think that's sort of how my strategy follows with design focus tasks. And then I do teach in ethics and professionalism. I think the biggest piece there to push students on, again, it comes down to justification and like, are they being clear in what they're saying? And maybe it's an argument, and that argument has certain pieces and evidence that they're putting forward. Maybe it's perspective and sort of their willingness to share valid points in that perspective and sort of openness to understanding other perspectives. So I guess for that course, it's more, at least how I like to focus on ethics and professionalism, is like expanding your mindset on the concept of what it means to be an engineer and understanding that that can mean very different things to different people, and how you act as a professional engineer is going to be an integration of like the professional responsibilities and duties that you learn about, but also like your own personal morals that you bring to the table, and that there's like value in like diversity of that. I think that's a great additional sort of follow-on question there. Like, how do I not get pushback from students when I ask them sort of a question from their question? Is I think it's sort of, if I only ask a question back to them, I never give them some tools of why, or explanation why I'm asking the question back. I think that can be frustrating for students. Like, I also have, I have a low threshold myself for like just silence. So if I ask a question back to the student and they're silent for like more than a couple seconds, I'm going to fill that silence anyway. So I think it's just personality wise that, you know, I'm not going to leave them alone with just questions that I put back for them, and then that's it. It's sort of about like, here's the question I'm going to ask back to you, and this is why I'm asking you this question back. Because if you start to think about things in that way and ask yourself these questions, then you're building the skill of not needing necessarily to get someone else's input. Like, you're sort of building your own like good judgment, critical thinking skill. So it's like trying to model almost like, maybe I'm the angel or devil on the shoulder, or I'm like the inner voice of, well, like, can you back that up? Or what is the metric associated with that? Or how do you know that that's true? Like, where's your credible source? So sort of like those like things that actually are hopefully questions that they internalize and ask themselves about. That's a great question. So I think there are some general things that I do to connect with students that probably doesn't differ too much depending on the course or the year, that I could talk about. And then also probably some that are quite specific to the topic. And then like just generally speaking, I think graduate students have different experiences than undergrad students. So then like the ways that we connect are probably different. So, I mean, one thing to mention is that I teach primarily in the 3rd and 4th year of our undergrad program. So I'll talk about undergrads first. So I don't really get a chance to connect much with 1st year or 2nd year students. But generally speaking, I think regardless of the year, I try to make myself available and approachable to students. So I think sometimes that availability isn't necessarily saying I have endless office hours, but it's more of like a signal in how I speak and how I ask for feedback. And I think students kind of pick up on that naturally. So students, I regularly say, you know, you can come and talk to me if something is going well with you, but also if you're experiencing some challenges. It doesn't all have to be related to the course content. And I guess from like a mental health standpoint, if you're going through something, like we can find a way through, just come and talk to me. So I think that sort of sets the scene that students kind of come and share with me some of the things that they're going with. Students sometimes ask me for my opinion or advice or guidance. And then just, I think the way that I am as a person is I'm always honest and straightforward. I think sometimes I get asked questions that I don't think I'm the best person to answer for, and I'll sort of say that. But I like to relate to students through like my own experiences. So I think back to when I was a student, or even how I feel currently, and just empathize with them in ways that they might be going through similar situations to what I have, or any like analogous situation that I can kind of put myself in their shoes and kind of normalize their experience. Because I know that the students are going through lots of different things than I would have these days. Like our society is quite different, but there's some general things of similarity of what it feels like to be a student and what it feels like to be doing something in a different generation than the people teaching you, and sort of giving them the sense that, you know, I also empathize that they're in a different situation from me and are considering things slightly differently. At any opportunity, I like to build rapport with students. I like to ask how they're doing. I ask for feedback. I generally think that I enjoy building relationships with students that I mean, professional relationships. And that's something that I think I just naturally enjoy doing as part of my job. And that because I like doing that, and I have some continuity seeing students in a bunch of different core courses for them, that I'm able to see them in different settings, and we're able to kind of talk through their journey and things that they might want to do next. I think in terms of like a class setting, I like to get students' input and ideas and bring them as much into the content and discussion as possible, and really build on the points that students bring up in class. This is something that's taken me practice to do. It feels like it's almost like an improv skill of like, oh, how can I think on my feet and, you know, really integrate what the person is saying. So I think there's a lot of active listening that I do for my students in all of these settings. And then just quickly, I'll talk about in the grad kind of student setting. Usually I feel like when students are in grad school, they're there because they really want to be there. I think nowadays sometimes students are in undergrad and you think they're all there because they want to be there, but some of them are just there for other reasons. So at least I feel like in grad school we're working with students who are like they really actually want to be there for the most part. They care about what they're doing and they see a vision for doing this professionally in the future. So then the types of ways that I relate to them and the things that they ask me about are slightly different, a little bit more focused, I would say, sometimes very career centered, and, you know, a lot focused on like professional development. In a number of different activities, and I'd say all of the ones that I'll mention are collaborations. So I haven't done much educational research that's been just on my own, unless it's been like really small little intervention in my classroom of the class that I teach by myself, basically. But I'll talk about a couple. There's one that I was focusing on last summer that I'm going to continue with some collaborators, where we're interested in understanding different student experiences through their co-op programs. And initially, we motivated this work by around a topic of gender. Like maybe women, let's say, are experiencing their co-op terms different from men or other gender diverse folks. So trying to see if that's actually true. There's some like motivating kind of literature out there to suggest that it might be true that women might take on more non-technical, we say it that way, more of the social kind of roles in their design teams, and maybe that bears out in their co-op terms. I give like a brief snapshot that we didn't necessarily see that when we looked at some data at UBC. And there's a lot of data to pour into. So this is just like a teaser of like what we will probably end up looking into more in terms of co-op. But there's lots of variability in terms of co-op experiences. And we have a lot of engineering undergraduates at UBC that are doing co-op terms. And so there's lots of interesting things to look at there. One being that example of maybe some differences in experiences, or the ways that students are reflecting on their experiences based on gender. I'm also part of a collaborative group at UBC of folks that are interested in evaluating the effectiveness of outreach. So we have a great group on campus housed in applied science called Gearing Up. And Gearing Up does a lot of amazing outreach for kids, high school students on variety of engineering topics, biomedical being one that's like heavily focused on. And so what does it mean to be a good, effective outreach initiative or program? Well, some of the things that you might think of would be, does it increase the number of people that are interested in STEM topics? Are more people coming into, let's say, biomedical engineering? Is that, if that was part of the goal, are we having more diversity of the different folks that exist in our population that then are coming into these fields? So there's many different ways that you can look at whether an outreach program was successful. Last year in ASEE, me and my collaborators presented on a topic really just highlighting that many programs evaluate based off of, did you like this outreach initiative? And a lot of times it's yes. But the more long-term tracking of the success and sort of on these larger metrics of interest and, you know, self-efficacy and, you know, entrance into a profession or like persistence in a STEM field, I think we're starting to dig into and wanting to explore. And then finally, I'll just talk about a project that I worked with some biomedical engineering colleagues and a colleague in our mechanical engineering department on embedding more sustainability tools and concepts into our design courses. So we have a second, third, and fourth year design course in our biomedical engineering program. There is a common first year that many engineering undergraduate students take. We have a slightly bit of an exception with a pre-biomedical engineering first year, but assuming, let's say, we're just talking from the second year onwards, the topic of sustainability is one that is not new and it's been around for a while, but typically we have paid it, I'll say, like a little bit more lip service, like, hey, don't forget the environment, remember it's here and think about it, but we don't give students any tools, any real time or priority to consider this topic unless the design topic happens to be really embedded in like creating something that is, you know, more environmentally friendly, and that's like central to the goal. I would say it's usually just like an add-on of like, don't forget, but we also aren't going to prepare you at all for tackling this. And I think this has downstream effects for like what students do when they graduate and where their priorities are placed in companies. And so I see this moving in the future of, we can't really keep this as an afterthought anymore. Like, we have to be prioritizing, giving the students the tools, at least the knowledge of, if this was something that you would prioritize in your design, that becomes really important. And we think there's reason for that. How would you go about doing that? And life cycle analysis is one example of a tool that many people might know about, and making sure, okay, if we're going to expect students can do a life cycle analysis, well, are we properly kind of introducing that and allowing them to build that skill rather than maybe putting it at the end and saying, hey, good luck, here's some resources that you can find and we'll see how you do with that, when really we're not preparing them well for it. So those are three examples of some scholarly work that I'm doing, very much in the context of, some of them in the context of courses, but some of them just like more broadly applicable. Yeah, I mean, I think if anyone's interested in like the scholarly work that I'm doing or any of the ideas that I shared or sort of topics that I'm interested, I'm happy for people to connect. So you're welcome to share my email. But I think one thing that I'll let the community know is that we're doing some good work up here at UBC in the School of Biomedical Engineering. We have a number of really dedicated professors that are teaching in our program. Specifically, our undergrad program has really cool, interesting areas of focus. So I mentioned cellular bioengineering is one sort of course that I teach. It's sort of a focus area of our program. We also have biomaterials, biomechanics, more of the medical device focus of, you know, biomedical systems and signals. And we also have an area related to bioinformatics. So quite a diverse program that sort of hits at many different areas of biomedical engineering. And then we also have some dedicated educational leadership folks. That's what we call the teaching stream professors here at UBC. We're hiring for a new professor in that teaching role that closes on November 14th, I believe. So maybe we can share that announcement, or I mean, even if you just search up UBC Educational Leadership School of Biomedical Engineering, you'll probably find it. But that's a good opportunity for anyone who's interested in the area.